With the world of coaching evolving and the carousel always changing, we're going to sit down with some coaches and we're going to figure out what they coach, how they coach, and most importantly, why they got into this profession. My name is Kason Wilkinson, and I am your host of the Coaches Why podcast.
I'd be lying to you if I said I knew a whole lot about like the world of men's volleyball, but the idea that I've kind of seen it, the videos I've seen, or maybe some of the rosters I've seen. Hawaii is kind of a pretty big men's volleyball state, especially at the high school space. And the reason why it's new to me is because there's no men's volleyball in the state that I'm from, and so I'm just it's kind of like lacrosse. It's kind of like a sport I've seen it's growing, but I just don't. I don't directly see it where I'm from. So the pipeline though to Hawaii, that's pretty cool. So you go out there quite often then for it? Is it like a once a year trip? What's that like to maintain a good pipeline out there?
Well, first of all, this will be my first trip out there. Because again, this was my first year coaching men's volleyball, and the first year with having Hawaiians. So I said I need to do that because the guys that were on the team, I need to continue that.
Sure.
And the islands are small, and so once you start getting a couple guys, it's just one of those where they just start feeding. I would love for it to be an annual thing, and to hit up those massive tournaments. But again, those are usually in that club season, which is in that January, December, February time slot. So this will maybe more go get maybe a grass tournament. To kind of see all the guys playing grass, and also just reach out to the clubs just to kind of get that kind of base connection going.
Sure, and you can't go wrong with the trip to Hawaii either.
So at the same time, that's always nice too, for sure. Absolutely, that's cool. Yeah, getting out there. So this was your first trip out here like this. Is that do you do a lot of these type of trips like in the state of Kansas? Are you going out bound a lot as well to find athletes, or is it kind of just Hawaii is your big out-of-state pipeline state that you're making these type of trips to?
Yeah, so a lot of it is out of state because just like New Mexico, Kansas does not have men's volleyball in the high school. It's not a sanctioned sport, so you're looking at clubs, and there's very few clubs around. And so for the teams that are in Kansas that have men's volleyball at the college level, you're hitting those 3-4 club teams, and you've got 4 or 5 teams you're trying to get those guys. And so mainly going out of the state. And so, like I said, which is interesting in men's volleyball, the coast are where the hotbeds are, but the college game, there's more college men's volleyball in the Midwest. Yeah. So just getting those guys to come in here. And once they get here, of course, some of them have never seen snow for the first time. And so get them here, then they're like, okay, it's not as bad as we think it is. So
I feel like that's really hard, to be honest, in regards to like Kansas doesn't have a sanctioned high school scene, but yet you have this at the college space. And I feel like that would be really, really difficult. I don't care what sport you are to have this in the state of Kansas or wherever state you are, but you don't have that at the high school level. So like, for one, recruiting, you're forced to get kids from out of state, which I don't know what that looks like in terms of tuition and the cost of school, but you have the out of state stuff sometimes and blah, 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 all kind of off the scene stuff or behind the scenes stuff. But in general, though, like I feel like that's really hard because now you're forced to spend a lot of time watching film, which you probably do anyways, but you know what I'm saying? Like you can't just go to a local tournament to go watch somebody.
Yeah, so you try to hit the big tournament dates, nationals, some local, or what I call local, but Kansas City area tournaments, or Dallas area, or Chicago is going to be another big one. So try to hit those as possible, but then you're utilizing the internet. And again, also international, just like Hawaii International is a big game in the men's game. And so bringing those guys in, and then using that pipeline as well. So when I made that transfer over to men's from the women's side, I had a lot of contacts on the women's side when I was in college coaching the women's side, and I just flipped it to the men's, and some of them were like, hey, glad you're back. So now we can start sending guys.
Yeah, I guess that's always beneficial when you have those contacts and you're able to actually have that relationship, and they obviously know where some of these things are. So yeah, hitting those 1 or 2 big scenes is unfortunately how it works, but I guess it also has a benefit too, where you can kind of see a mass amount in one tournament versus one or two guys kind of spread out across the season too. So I'm sure there is some pros to it, even though it's not necessarily ideal for in-state versus out-of-state type of things.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Well, with that being said, guys, Coach, I appreciate you taking the time to jump on the phone on the show today. I know we've been talking a lot about men's volleyball, so if you guys guessed it, you're absolutely right. We are talking men's volleyball today. Today we have Brandon Stephenson, the head men's volleyball coach up there at Kansas Weslayan University. So we're super excited to talk a little bit to Coach today about the sport and kind of where it started, where it's going. As I mentioned, kind of, or I guess slightly stated the growth of it. I know maybe not at the high school level, but at the collegiate level, and even I think maybe professionally too. I could be wrong, but just the idea that you are seeing this growth of the sport and you're seeing it more. So it is kind of cool. There's some pros and cons to it, of course, like we said about not having it in every state. But in the internal terms, men's volleyball is growing. So I've actually talked to a women's volleyball coach about this at one point not too long ago. We talked about kind of the difference between schematics in the men's and women's volleyball, and we don't really talk about schematics per se in the first episode, just because this is more about you and coaching and philosophy. But he kind of mentioned there is a little bit of difference, just because, you know, with the men's game being really powerful. Not saying women aren't, but, you know, if you watch it, the guys are just springing high. You see the ball hitting really hard, right? And so I guess just in layman's terms, the game isn't different, but it's also different, right? So you've coached both, like you said, this is your first year coaching men's. So what has that been like for you in that transition going from men's to women, or excuse me, from women's to men's, and how that has, you know, as a coach, you know, maybe with the game or maybe with how you coach, different things like that, right? If that makes sense, how that transition's been.
Yeah. So the biggest thing is with the men's side, they're able to do a lot more things just in drills. So having to push them a little bit more. And like you said, the power is there. So in the course of a game, if you can get a volley going back and forth, that's massive. You don't really see that. It's usually one side gets it up and then put it down, or you may get a block.
Sure.
So if you're able to go back and forth in the men's side, I mean, that's a big thing. But then you're also looking more at the serve and serve receive type of setup, at how we can beat them there, because with a lot of these guys doing top spins, jump top spins, I mean, they're rocking the ball at 70 plus miles an hour. And to have that ball come, if you're not perfect, you're shanking. And that's kind of a big thing versus the women's. Women's, you can set up an offense. You can run a lot of free ball plays as the ball goes back and forth. And so men's, you're just working to get in a spot and just trying to read as much as possible and just dig a ball up. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's a perfect pass, it's just get the ball up so somebody can come underneath it. So with me, a lot of our drills, again, having to readjust, maybe not do certain drills that I did with the women's side just because how the men are. And also this first year I used that to kind of build my pool of drills with the guys, just knowing what works, what may be too slow pace. And then kind of get their feedback afterwards, and they say, "Hey, coach, this is a great drill." And so then you kind of put a check mark, and you go, "Okay, now I need to put that in my little bag of drills as the season goes on."
Sure, yeah. So it sounds like in some of that, which, like I said, we don't talk a whole lot about, but you're mentioning how, like, in the women's side, you can kind of set things up, and on the guy side, it's more, like you said, a lot of times, anyways, it's kind of up and down, right, and kind of straight to it. So I'm jumping way ahead here. We won't necessarily talk about recruiting this early, but when it comes to these guys you're finding, it sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, you're trying to find guys who, for one, have pretty good footwork and technique, I'm assuming, but also who are explosive, get up, get down, athletic, right side to side agility, things like that. Just because that seems to be the style of play. So if you have to just, you know, I don't know, like, I guess on the women's side, you can kind of have some more of those set pieces and kind of how they're approaching the ball, stuff like that, which I'm not saying you don't do that on the men's side, but a lot of that's just explosiveness and just straight to the, you know, like you said, straight to the point, kind of up and down. So is that kind of accurate to the type of people that you're looking for, essentially?
Yeah. So again, you're looking at guys, again, that can explode. If they're touching 11 foot, 12 foot, those are the ones that, you know, are going over blocks. So even though they may be undersized height-wise, a lot of these guys have some springs. I mean,
Sure.
I got a kid who's 5'6", who probably close touches 10'9". And I saw the film, and he told me the height, and I was like, "There's no way." Then I see video, I'm like, "You're blocking a guy on the outside." Like, yeah.
Yeah.
So these guys that can translate the basketball jumping ability into volleyball
Mhm.
just adds more to it. And so, yeah, you're looking at power, explosive power jumping, and then that hitting power. Like if you're putting the ball down inside the 10-foot line at any angle, I mean, that's just a bonus. And then, of course, the game has a lot of back row attacking as well on the men's side. And so being able to have all three options across the back row at different variations of the game helps big time to add another fourth, fifth hitter.
Sure. Yeah. And I think the reason why I brought this up was because I remember now that conversation I had with him was it was right around the time that there was a video that was going on where there was like a 49-47 set where it was back like, or a game, I should say. Not, well, I guess it's a set, but you know, a particular game in that game. So I guess it is a set. So there we go. But anyways, it was just crazy high scoring. Like I've never personally seen something that high. I mean, there might be like that other places, but anyways, it was just so crazy. And he did tell me that it was a men's volleyball game and that some of the differences. So something like that, like that's crazy, right? Like as a coach, how do you even, like it could be any sport, but obviously in your perspective, right? There's going to be games where it's literally back and forth. Defense can't stop them. Offense is firing on all cylinders, but we cannot stop their offense, right? So in that position like that, like how do you even coach a team through that? Do you just hope you get a stop? Are you trying to make adjustments? Are you just trying to outscore them? Like what's your mentality in a high, I'm not saying 49-47, but you know, a high point set?
Yeah, again, if you can get runs, volleyball's always been a game of runs. We always call it roller coaster, your highs and lows, and you can eliminate the lows as much as possible. And so the kind of motto is if you can give up 1 or 2 point max in a set, as far as in a rally going back and forth, you have the ability to stay with them. And we've seen it on our side this last year. We were down 24-19 and came back, and I think we lost 28-26. So you are in that position that if you can go back and you have a great server that can rally off 5 points and know position wise those servers in certain orders and just hope that they miss a serve just to kind of rotate, that's ultimately it. So you're hoping they can miss a serve, you can go and rally 3 or 4 points, and then you give up 2 points and then rally 3 or 4 more points, and then so it is that way of game of runs. And then hopefully like at the end of the day your runs are bigger than their runs.
Yeah, that's at the end of the day. Hopefully you outscore the opponent in your runs. Yeah, that's fair. Absolutely. Well, I appreciate that. I really do. I think that that's really intriguing, and I will say that the men's volleyball has I've always said this. Like if no one's ever watched a volleyball game, those really intense back and forth sets, right? Where and I know the first 4 sets, I think it's the game of 25, and then the 5th set's game of 15. Those games, like we mentioned, that's 28-26, or it's back and forth, 29-27, whatever. Like those are really intense back and forth, especially when, like in the situation where you guys were down, y'all are coming back, right? So as a fan, it's pretty impressive to see. So on the men's side, with that explosiveness, you add that addition to it, right? It's a fun game to watch if you're not used to volleyball, if you haven't seen it. So I appreciate you kind of diving into some of those things and how you approach that. But I'm curious to know a little bit about you. So, where did you grow up and when did you get involved with really all sports, but, volleyball, since that's obviously what we're coaching?
Yeah. So I born and raised in Kansas, played football because again, like we said, volleyball was not an option at all in Kansas. The biggest thing though, is I grew up in a coach's family. Both parents were college coaches. My mom coached volleyball for 48 years, I think it is now.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I was ingrained at 2 weeks of age on the volleyball court. And so just having that aspect behind me, and then my dad was a college basketball coach, and they both did high school as well. And so I kind of grew up in there. So a lot of people say I grew up drawing the X's and O's. I literally was doing that as well. Getting caught in grade school, getting in trouble because I'm doing that versus studying. But also going on recruiting trips with my parents. So I grew up in that world of knowing, hey, here's what we're looking for. Scouting opponents. That was kind of my big calling. And so, when I got of age to start coaching, it was just a given. And then also when I was doing that coaching, I would hear other players talk about their of like, hey, keep your head up. Yeah, he's going to yell at us, and just stay positive. So you're looking at how impactful a coach can be on the negative side as well as the positive side. And then also how those interactions with my parents, with their players were, and how they continue to talk to them. And now with me growing through this coaching, now I've got players that are coaching at the college level, and I'm still in contact with them, and they're asking me questions, or they are sending me kids if they're coaching club, hey, go talk to this coach. And so having that impact was big. And the coaches that I played for at the high school level and college level football, I still talk to today. And so in this, how that translate from different sport to different sport, because at the end of the day, it's all about communications, and it's all about relationships with those athletes.
For sure, yeah. Yeah, I can agree with that for sure. The relationships is a big piece of all this, and I can only imagine which one day, right? Like I'm relatively new to coaching. I've been doing it for a few years, but I don't have anybody who's got to that point of coaching at the next level or just in general, right? And so I bet that feels amazing because that is tit for tat. The relationships you build, right? Like whether they knew they wanted to coach or not because of an outside source, the relationship they were able to have because of you or with you as a coach or whomever, right, was influential enough to be like, I want to give back to these people or to the sport or whatever it may be. So I'm sure that feels really, really good as a coach to kind of have your own coaching tree essentially based off of some of those relationships that you built.
Oh, yeah. And I said, that was one where, in fact, I just talked to one of my former players this last spring when we went up and played their men's team, and she goes, Coach, you were the one that told me what I needed to hear, not what I wanted to hear. And now she does that with her players. And she's done a very good job on the women's game, been very successful. And so seeing that and having her talk to me about that, I mean, as a coach, if you're not winning championships, those are the wins right there with that. And so getting that, because now you know the struggles you had with them while they were your player, and the battles that you had to go with them on, paid off in the end.
Yeah, I can only imagine that. I mean, that's a beautiful piece of it. I think at the end of the day, as we, as coaches in general, kind of go amongst them every day with those struggles and those challenges, not only as a coach, but with those people, like those relationships get real tight and become better. And I think at the end of the day, having that type of interaction with that person now, right, X amount of years later, or X amount of time later, it feels really good. I've kind of done that with some of my old coaches. I had a coach who was my high school coach, actually, and I got to coach alongside of him. And I remember I was at a tournament while coaching with him, and there was probably at least five people who were coaches now that were all kind of in the same run. Like we all went to the same school. We were all part of the state championship teams. We had a few guys older than me. I was kind of the middle, and there's a few guys younger than me that were all coaching. And I asked him the same thing. I was like, dude, how does it feel? It must feel great. And he's like, yeah. And he kind of told me the same thing about those relationships. So I'm gonna what do you call it whenever you? Let me just say I'm gonna write this down now, because when I ask a question at the end, I'm sure this is gonna come out again. But I can appreciate that that's something that you don't take for granted and that you really value as you've been. So it sounds like from an early age, you've been, for one, you're around coaching from an early age, but it sounds like probably you knew you wanted to coach just because that was your life essentially as a kid. So did you know that you wanted to coach, even though the X's and O's were cool and you were doing that because at a young age, right? That's just something we do. But did you know from a young age you wanted to coach, or was there a person/reason that you actually decided to go into that career?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was one of two fields I was going into. The other was farming and agriculture, because those two fields are what my family's been involved with. And so life stuff happened on the other part. And so with the coaching tree, with some of the people I've been with, it was more of, I'm on the court, I'm not in a classroom, I'm not in an office, just sitting there for 8 hours a day. And then also being able to be out and talk with those kids and parents, because again, you're going through recruiting cycles, you're going through recruiting kind of trips, and you're like, okay, how do I do these things? How do I do film? How do I what questions to answer. And so when I was at the junior college level, I could get with those kids and say, here's what you need to ask those 4-year coaches. Maybe not say challenge them, but put them on a spot where they have to think, okay, this kid's serious. And so the questions he's asking are in-depth questions of getting to know me as a person. And now taking those same ones and applying them to, say, club coaches and club players to say, hey, here's what you need to ask these coaches. And so doing that, one thing that I enjoyed early in my career is my mother was still coaching at the college level when I got into junior college. And so we would go recruiting together, and we may be talking to the same kid, and of course the same last names, they're associating. So I may introduce myself, and then she'd come right around and say, hey, I'm Mrs. Coach Stephenson. And they're like, and so kind of playing that and having a little fun with the kids. And so we did that a couple of times, but it was kind of cool being able to see how my mom interacts with athletes, and then she could see how I interact with those same kids, and build those relationships. But it's one of those that's very interesting to know that even though I wasn't initially thinking about coaching growing up, I had those trainings happening with both my parents, and it just ended up I'm going this direction. And luckily, one of my parents was in the sport that I'm coaching in, so I can still ask her questions. In fact, I was at the high school the last 3 years before I took this job, and my mother, the last 2 years, was my assistant coach. So kind of cool. full circle there with that.
So, for one, I can imagine that'd be really funny. I can only see some of those kids' face with the whole you walk up and then they walk by like that. That's funny, actually. But your mom. It sounds like your mom and your dad were very influential into maybe some of the ways that you carry yourself as a coach now. Maybe some recruiting things. Maybe just how you socialize. Maybe it's just how you carry yourself as a coach. There could be a few things, but I have a few questions based off of the things you just mentioned in there. But I'm really interested before we get to that about your influential coaches, because in terms of who was influential to you, right? So you've talked about mom and dad a lot, so it sounds like they're probably in this list. But was there any other coaches as well that influenced you in whatever way? And then also just in general, right? I guess I'm mentioning about what you learned from them, but so I guess we can dive into that. What did you learn and what did they teach you, throughout your time, whether it's as a coach or as a person, whatever it may be? But who are some influential coaches and what did you take from them essentially?
No, I had 3 other coaches. One was my high school coach when I transferred into the high school I graduated from. My last 2 years, I was kind of up in the air of am I going to play or not, because it went from a real small school to a bigger school. And I talked with the coach in the summer. It was up in the air. My sister had already said, I'm coming to this high school. And a week before the football team camp, he just calls up and says, you coming? And I said, yeah, that was it. And from then on, we had a big relationship. In fact, I saw him this last fall. He goes, but as much weight you lost, he goes, you wouldn't be able to play for me now. He was one that he would get very intense. Like you could see the veins popping from his neck when he would talk to talk to the team, get him pumped. But he was there that you knew that if something happened, you could go to him. And he really helped me get into that college mindset of I can play at this level. And then going to the college that I went to, my offensive line coach there was one that would get as intense, but he also had a different relationship with us, where going into his offices after practice, after classes, if we're taking a nap on the couch, like in between classes, asking him questions, he was a little bit more personal with that, and sort of different aspect of it. And then when I transferred to my 4-year institution, the quarterbacks coach actually was the quarterbacks coach at the college that my parents had taught at when I was 12, and I was his ball boy.
That's cool.
And he didn't realize initially when he came recruiting me out of JUCO until the first time we met. He go like, "Are you so and so's kid?" I said, "Yeah." I go, "Are you so and so's dad?" Because I went to school with his daughter. And he goes, "Yeah." He goes, "We know each other." And so I ended up going up there and playing for them. Didn't work out because of injuries, but had got up there. And so having that, and then when I went to the Division II level, NCAA Division II level to coach at, he was at one of our conference schools as a quarterbacks coach there too, so I was able to talk to him when I was there when we visited his school. And so just keeping those three connections is big. And they're spread out amongst the United States now. And every once in a while I see them, or just on Facebook or something just kind of pops up, and we reach out. And so we reconnect like nothing's happened in those years. So.
Yeah, that's really cool to have those connections and have that, again, relationships, right? Having those connections in that regard too. I think especially as you go into coaching, it's really nice. Yeah, your family, which you're kind of in a unique situation where both your parents were coaches, so you got to see it as well. But kind of in general, for people who may not have that experience, kind of being in that situation where your high school coach, your college coach, whatever it may be, was that important person, not only in that time frame, but now they're the person that you get to talk to and ask questions about. So like you said, maintaining that and just being in that, nowadays social media, of course, you can kind of keep up with things a little bit easier, but kind of having that place essentially to be able to reach out and have that relationship to where if you have questions, similar to where you said that your ex-athletes essentially were, or previous athletes were, will do that to you. I think that goes a long way, because there are times that every coach goes through, like, man, what do I do here? Like, what should I do here? And having those coaches you can reach out to and just ask questions about, I think is huge for not only comfort, but also to know, really know that you're not, even though you're in it alone, quote unquote, you're not in it alone, essentially.
Yeah, no, it is. And I'll get them just little things about practice schedules, about tryouts. My grad assistant I had probably about 6 to 8 years ago, she's at a club in Texas, and she'll call up and say, hey, what do you think about doing this? Or here's what we have going down. Or when are you coming down to Texas? Like all those little things to help her out in her growing of herself as a club coach and all that side. So yeah, having those relationships, and now being able to ask those former players or former grad assistants, hey, what do you do as well? Because the biggest thing is if you stop learning the game and being a student of the game, I mean, it's time to kind of move on. And so even at 90 years of age or 20 years of age, you've got to be learning because the game's changing every year with rule changes, with how recruiting's done, just with how the play is. It changes all the time. And if you're not staying on top of it, you're going to get left behind. So being able to communicate with those former players, athletes, coaches that were maybe your assistant or you were their assistant is crucial.
For sure, yeah, especially as you, like you said, I think the biggest thing is as things change and as the game changes, right? We have to evolve, as you mentioned, and I think that's cool that you were able to do that, because I know there are some sports out there. Maybe it's just some coaches, maybe not sports as a whole, but there are some coaches out there, which luckily I haven't really met them, so this is also maybe hypothetical, but I would assume there are some coaches out there that don't really want to give up all of what they're doing, especially if they're successful, right? And which, I mean, I don't know if you can fault them per se, but at the same time, like, I don't know if that really grows the game, but I don't know. That's a whole nother topic for another day, but I think that it's really cool that you guys are open with each other and you have that relationship as to ask those questions. And I think you touched something earlier about the club scene and especially when you had like the athletes ask questions, like, what do you think I need to work on, right? It kind of puts them on the spot. So I'm just kind of curious to know, where is men's volleyball club in comparison to women's volleyball club, and what do you feel like? Okay, we all know in a lot of sports, club scene is really pay to play, and it costs a lot of money. It's a lot of travel, blah 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 down the list. So I guess part of this question is also, is that something that people have to do or need to do in order to be seen by the college space, especially because yours might be a little bit different, knowing that you don't have high school in every state to actually, kind of back up what they can do.
Yeah, the club scene is one it kind of can be a very touchy situation to talk about because some clubs can get pretty pricey and will have restrictions. By the time you get to a certain age level, you have to be a certain height, or you're paying almost a full semester or even a year's worth of tuition just to play a club season. And hopefully you can get that NCAA scholarship or whatnot. And then hopefully then you don't have to pay as much in college. So a lot of these athletes are banking on that, and parents are banking on that. But on the men's side, because of the limitation of availability, club's the best way. Until all the states kind of start getting sanctioned men's volleyball, club's about the only chance they have for those guys to be seen. And there's a lot of good clubs out there that are doing it the right way, where the cost of tournaments is going up, so they have to balance that. But they're not trying to really take it and really abuse that situation. So a lot of clubs are trying to do it the right way out there, and then trying to promote their guys through coach ID camps. Like I just did one earlier in June where they brought in 6 of us coaches to run a couple drills and just to get the exposure, because they're not getting that exposure unless you're in that area. And also trying to help promote it, like helping be on committees to try to push it through these high school organizations to say, hey, you need to do this with that. And so and also add in a sport to give the guys another participation in high school. Some don't want to go out for track. Some don't want to do baseball. And so once they get done with basketball or football, there's nothing for them in the spring. And so this adds another kind of avenue for them to do that. But again, Midwest, you see a lot of those older clubs, especially in the Chicago, Illinois area. And so they've been around for a long time. They've done it the right way. And then you get some that may not have any sports for the guys in the spring, and this is the only way, their avenue. I know some of the guys playing club in Kansas, they're driving 4 hours to go to club practice, or they're going virtual on high school, so that way they can then be able to have more flexibility of traveling.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it's more of a let's get it to the high school scene, so we can actually give it a little bit more of a, I wouldn't say even playing field, but kind of that even playing field to give opportunities really for people, and which is I love to hear that club scene in Chicago, like you said, has been doing it the right way, because I think that you have the hit or miss on some people, and not to take anything away, but it is just what it is. So I love to hear that there is, and I know that you just one reference, I'm sure there's plenty out there as well, but when you do the club scene the right way, it does really help a lot with, like you said, opportunities and getting them the chance to go to just participation. So I can really appreciate that piece. And so, you've mentioned a few times about the game, how it's changed and evolving, and you've been at, a few different levels, high school, 4-year school, 2-year school, things like that. What are some of the biggest challenges you faced? Not necessarily recruiting, because we'll get into that as well, but what are some of the biggest challenges you faced as a coach from essentially where you started to now?
I think a lot of it is your limitations on what you can do. And that could be due to the rule policies of that level. It could be due to the equipment you have, funding you have, scholarshiping you have, location is another one. So you have to be very creative to be able to give a lure of a Division I style program with a junior college or high school budget. And so being very creative with that, understanding that you're going to spend some of your own money, and then maybe that reward will come later down the road. So those are some things there. The other thing too is just knowing where you can ask as far as coaching peers. Who can I ask for help? Who can I ask for how they did this? So getting involved in organizations like the AVCA, getting on those mentor-mentee programs. Like I said, I've been a mentor and a mentee, both. In fact, I'm probably looking to try to be a mentee again now at the men's side, just to get a better appreciation. So getting those things, trying to find out the coaches clinics that are beneficial to my area, my level, I think was another big hurdle with that. Again, this understanding just the game. I mean, that's another, since if you never played the game and now you're trying to coach it, it's trying to understand the ins and outs. Now, I will say this, and I can't remember who I heard this from. This was another college coach, that sometimes the best coaches are the ones that never played the sport because they haven't formed the bad habits.
Yep.
And
I've heard
there
that
are
too.
there are a lot of great coaches at every level. There's some great ones at the high school and at the Division 1, and then vice versa. There's bad ones at both. And so
Sure.
where that level is at that you're at coaching doesn't mean that you don't make an impact. I mean, that was the thing with me is do I make an impact at this level compared to somebody else? And then also when you're going to those coaches clinics is you see the success their athletes are having when they're demoing it, and then you go, can my athletes actually do those drills? And
Yeah.
knowing how to wash them down or have the faith that your athletes can do them.
Yeah, you have to, and on that one in particular, you just have to know your athletes. You have to know what they're good at, what they're not good at, and knowing how. And sometimes it's not even like, I guess you kind of said watering it down, but just kind of changing that drill to where you still get maybe 80% of that drill, but the other 20% you got to kind of make it your own or whatever, right? So adjusting for that, I think is just like anything else, though. I guess just like coaching your athletes, you have to know. Like some athletes love when like they don't listen very well. Well, let me retract that. Some people are okay with you maybe more yelling at them, right? They're like you, depending on who you are as a coach, they may take that better than just talking to them. They need you to kind of be on top of them, practicing in the game, whatever it is. Maybe even just when they're in your office talking to you about life. And contrary, some people don't do well with yelling, right? They need you to just talk to them like a person. So not only on the personal side as a coach, but also like you said, like schematics, knowing when and knowing what to change can be the difference in little growth versus huge growth, right? So knowing how to do that as a coach, I think also plays just as big, if not bigger than a technique that you have to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh yeah. And that's the biggest thing is I've had whole teams certain years say, Coach, we need to run more. We need to be punished. And I go like, why should I punish you guys for stuff? And then I've had some that, like you said, you can't be hard on them because if you're hard on them, they shut down. And so that could be a whole team. It can be an individual. And I always would tell athletes too, I said, if there's a issue happening off court, if we need a word phrase that you just say, Coach, and you said this word phrase, I'm like, gotcha, go do what you got to do, and then come back and get regrouped. And that's where having those relationships, having those weekly meetings, understanding the athlete off the court, what makes them tick, and then what issues are going on off the court to help them on the court.
Yep.
For sure. Yeah. Almost like the safe word, kind of that safe phrase, like, hey, Coach, I need a moment, right? I love that. That's actually really cool that you have that as a instilled, I should say, in your program, that they feel comfortable to be able to do that, and you guys have that between you guys. So I can appreciate that piece. You said that you've been at a few different places, high school, JUCO, now obviously at a 4-year space or 4-year school. So just out of curiosity, what's the biggest transition or maybe the biggest difference or change or whatever it is kind of between the three, especially as the men's space has grown more, right? I guess we should, well, hold on, how do I want to word that? Because I know you weren't coaching men's in high school, right? So I know the game's a little bit different. So maybe just the transition in general as a coach, right? That from JUCO to high school and the 4-year space, maybe on the coaching space, not necessarily on the game, has been the biggest changes for you as you've experienced them.
Yeah, so I started my very first probably 15 years was at the junior college level. And so getting those athletes that were hungry because they're trying to get that scholarship to the next level. And so some of those athletes, you can see that hunger and that passion trying to get to that next level, or they're there for socializing. I think, and I tell some of my current athletes and stuff, some of the responses we get from kids who may choose the 4-year over the JUCO is very amazing. The one that I always remember is they didn't want to go JUCO because they didn't want to make new friends after 2 years. And I was like, Are you serious? So some of those responses you get, you kind of look at going, really? But then it helps kind of edit those kids out of where you want them to be at. High school level, again, you have restrictions on what you can do, when you can do it. And so they're also playing 2-3 other sports. And so time is a crunch. And so you're getting that, I get you for 2 hours here. Hopefully you don't get burned out because you just had basketball practice and we're trying to finalize some stuff. Also, the coaches of those other sports are wanting them around for doing fundraising as well. and they're wanting them there as well. So it's trying to find that fine line with them, but also give them the time that they can recover and get their academics. And then at the 4 year, you're looking at ones that trying to keep that hunger. Freshman year, they're hungry, they're wanting it. As they go through the years, some of them they lose that passion because of whatever. I mean, stuff
Yeah.
on the court, stuff in the classroom, stuff off the campus, and so trying to keep that hunger, that passion with them is big and key. And so each level again has their own limitations. Um, and each one has made an impact in my coaching career of how I've gone about doing things. So the high school side, I think, was at a good timing because not to say got burned out at the 2 year, but it was one of those where it's like I need to step away,
Yeah.
and the high school didn't allow me to step away because as soon as they heard I was back in town, they're like, "You're coming on staff."
Yeah.
But it allowed me to slow down and get back to teaching
Sure.
the game.
Yeah.
With those kids. So that was a big thing, which then I think helped me when I got the call to come back to the college level, and then make the switch to the men's. Is it allowed me for understanding, okay, I need to talk with the guys more, get them to be more bought in by giving them a little bit of say, so they have ownership in the program.
Yeah. Well, I can appreciate the explanation of all three of those and kind of what you've experienced. I was a high school coach. Now I'm at a 2-year space right now as well. So I'm enjoying being at the 2-year space. I do enjoy the JUCO, but you've said a few things in there that's really intriguing to me. One of them, I'll talk to you a little bit about like the hunger space. I think that's an interesting topic, but I heard from a long time ago, I can't remember what episode it was. It had to be within the first 12, maybe 15, a long time ago. But basically it said, a coach told me, don't be afraid to step away from what you know to go learn again, right? And so you might be the head coach at the, like you said, JUCO, and you step back, quote unquote, step back to the high school level just to kind of, like you said, kind of refresh. And now you might, same thing with burning out. Maybe you were burning out at the college level, right? And it kind of gave you a new fire or whatever else might have been going on at that. So not being afraid to step away, or maybe even in other cases, maybe take that assistant job from the head coaching job, right? Just so you can learn from other areas, learn, blah, 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 whatever down the line. So knowing when to do that, I think is important too, because otherwise you as a coach may get burnt out, but also you may not have the, like, who knows, right? Like you might have been somewhat successful, semi-successful there. And then just by taking that little bit of leap or that little bit of learning curve, right? The 2 or 3 years of kind of going back to the basics, to then go into your next opportunity. Now look at you. Now look what you've been able to grow to. So I also think knowing when to do that as a coach is just as important as well, because, I mean, obviously we're human too. We have to know, we obviously want success, but sometimes it's stepping away, stepping down, changing, basically just pivoting, changing our direction is what is really going to ultimately lead us to that, high road, I guess, of success. So knowing when to do that, I think is just as important.
Yeah, it is. And sometimes you don't realize you need that break. Because like when I stepped from down to the high school, I went down to freshman ball. So very
Oh, wow,
beginning
okay.
and all that. So I really went down a lot. And it allowed me to enjoy it again. Like really teaching that game and really developing those girls to where now the upperclassmen are like, okay, we want you to come to all of our tournaments too.
Sure.
And so, again, like you said, knowing when to do that, and sometimes going down a level, like I said, it doesn't matter what level you're at, because a lot of coaches, when they're first getting in, they're like, I want to go coach at Division I. I want to be a professional coach. If you go right there right away, you haven't kind of cut your teeth, and so sometimes a lot of younger coaches need that teeth cutting time to just learn the game, learn how to handle players of different backgrounds, of different experiences, parents, administration, just kind of knowing how to really do all those things. And once you learn that and be able to time management with those skills and then slowly build up. Like I said, some of those the best coaches are at the high school level, and they've made that jump to Division I after being 20 years of high school. They got a shot, and they're like, okay, I needed those years. Maybe grind it out, struggle, but eventually somebody's going to say, hey, you need that opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen it on the same side of the college space too. I've seen coaches who spent years and years and years as an assistant, and they finally get their job or the opportunity to, and now they're finding success. So I can definitely appreciate just knowing and knowing where you are in your timeline before you make those leaps, and maybe just during your, maybe not leaps, but those opportunities that come, I think really do make a big difference in what you see. And I love the teeth cutting reference because there is a lot, especially at the high school level. Parents are very, very active, a lot more than college anyways. So knowing how to become almost that customer service manager, right? You're kind of, you're project manager, you're coach, you're all sorts of things, right? So just, I agree. Let's just keep it at that. I can agree that that's something that I think you have to know how to do. And I think it's interesting too, because I don't really want to touch base. Well, I have a question that I'm going to ask future coaches. I don't know, maybe. It was really interesting because as you were talking about going down to freshman ball and you said that some of those upperclassmen are wanting you to go, I never really even thought about this question, but similar to like when you're in like the JUCO to the 4-year space, or in today's world with transfer portal, you might have more than 2 coaches, but at high school, you have a freshman coach, sometimes you have the JV coach, and then you got the varsity coach. So you're technically changing between 2 or 3 coaching staffs, even though you're maybe under the same umbrella, right? Every coach, every high school is different in how they intertwine their coaches, but you're changing coaching staff. So that hunger sometimes can be fluctuated in high school space anyways, because of the coaching staffs, right? And especially at the college level too, right? Which you said there's some stuff on the mat, or excuse me, on the court, off the court, that may be a factor in it. But that hunger, I think, is very intriguing and very true. My actual question I'm going to get to is about the hunger, but I do think that talking about the idea of changing between coaching staffs, potentially, whether it's same coaching staff, but like I said, from varsity or from freshman up, or coaching staff at the college space is an interesting topic too, which I'm going to ask, maybe not to you, but I'm going to think of that one because I think that's very, very intriguing. So I appreciate you talking about your freshman adjustment and some of those things, but the hunger, I'm interested. So hunger is one of those things, like, I always say, I can't flip your switch for you. You have to want it just as much as I want it for you, and I can't want it more than you. Because if I do that, then I'm going to be irritated and I'm not going to get what I look out of it, right? You have to want it just as much and more than anybody around you. So long story short, when you start seeing some of these people lose hunger, whether it's high school or the college space, right, or at the JUCO space you're at, they didn't want to go to 4-year, whatever reference you want to look at, is there a way for you to actually coach a kid through the hunger? Like when they start kind of lacking it, is there a way for you to like help kind of create that fire again, or is that more of it's a personal thing, they have to figure it out on their own to get that hunger back?
I think it's a couple of different ways you can look at that, because again, knowing the kid, there could have been something happen off the field, off the court, in their personal life that has caused that hunger to set back. It could be parents, divorcing, passing away, something like that, where they just lose that instantly. And so knowing and having that relationship with that kid to get him through that time may bring that hunger back. If it's a high school kid or say junior college kid that may not be getting the recruitment letters, and they're like, Coach, I'm not getting this. So like, can I really play at that next level? And then having those words with them saying, listen, wait a little bit. One in particular I can think of is when I was at a JUCO, I had a Brazilian who, her friends were getting recruitment letters in the fall, and they were starting to sign. And I just told her, I said, just be patient. I go, right now they're trying to sign those 4-year kids. Once that kind of time frame has gone by, now they're going to try to fill it with the JUCOs and get those instant kids. And sure enough, within, I would say probably 4 weeks, 5 weeks, she got letters from a school and ended up going there. And of course, then she's like, hey, Coach, after the next year, she's like, hey, my coach and I were just not getting along. I said, be patient. I go, remember how you and I were when we first met. And eventually, after her second year, they won conference. First time ever that school won conference title. And she starts slowly building that up. And so it just kind of depends on the kid. Some of them, again, if they're ones that coming in expecting to play right away, they don't get that. And they're always asking, hey, what do I got to do? What do I got to do? And the only response you have is keep grinding. And then over time, if they don't have that success on the court, they're like, okay, I'm done. It could be I've wasted too many times. I don't want to waste even more of my parents' money at that JUCO 4 year. And so some of them they go, hey, we get that, we understand, but don't just give up because you're not seeing the success on the court. You're not getting the reps. You're not getting starting time. Because everyone now in today's society is we want that Instagram, that Twitter posts out there, look at me type of 15 seconds fame, and getting those kids to understand that there's a process, the grind, talking about Jordan, talking about last chance U video, all those things those kids have to do. And by the way, I was on Last Chance U. So
Really?
yes, the season I played for Coffeyville Community College. And so the Independence one, the very first season in Independence, I'm on, I think the first episode, like at 2.3 minutes into it. There were shaking hands and I'm number 77. You see the back of me. I always tell the people that because that's my little 15 seconds of fame.
Okay.
But they were talking about those kids being this horrible teams, and Coffeyville, who was in the same county, 15 minutes down the road, was having all the success, and just how Independence tried to bring that back. So I think shows like that can show a great aspect and allow kids to see kids struggling, losing that hunger, but then eventually can see that hunger coming back with that.
Great point.
Great point. Yeah, I think there are the Last Chance U. I've heard, which by the way, it's pretty cool that you're on there. I actually had a football coach on here, one of my first ever episodes. He was actually assistant coach for Butler football team, and so we talked a little bit about the Last Chance U stuff. But it's interesting because the Last Chance U, I guess, getting back to what I was talking about, that show, you hear. I mean, I was a huge fan. I watched every episode, football, basketball. I watched everything on there. I still go back and watch it sometimes. I really wish they'd come back with another episode, to be honest with you. I loved it so much. But just as a fan, right, like you like the show. But I've heard a lot of ups and downs about, like, the more I talk about it, maybe coaches or people that were close to it or whatever the case is, they kind of have this maybe thought process of what JUCO life is, right? Especially the Independence coach had its ups and downs, right? Coach JB, whether you loved him or hated him, he was super, super aggressive and talked super, in today's world, super crazy. Might not have been crazy to how we grew up. I mean, my coaches didn't really talk necessarily like him, but they definitely yelled like him. But it's one of those things, right, where like you see this, not commonality, but maybe this stigma of what the JUCO space is, and that's what coaching is, or maybe that's what the space is. But if you really break it down, like what you're talking about, how you see these kids who, especially these D1 bounce backs, they went D1. He was a 4-star or a 5-star, and he has to truly find a way back. He has to find his way, right? So I love that you're referencing the Last Chance U thing, because if you actually do it more than just on the surface level, it's actually really beautiful what JUCO and maybe some other opportunities are for people. And it's, I think you're right. I think it is a great way of teaching from a third party perspective of, hey, it's okay to lose it. We just have to find a way to not give up. Don't quit. Trust the process, and you'll find your way. But it's most important to just, you can't give up, can't quit. You just trust the process, trust it. So I love that.
Yeah, and I actually had a lot of great experiences going JUCO and playing there. You get to see a different side of things, guys from all over across the United States. And so you're seeing, and some of my buddies that I still talk to, I mean, they're guys I would never have come across if I didn't go that route. Granted, I was on a very successful team there and historically was very good. And so got to see the positive side and got to see the success side, and then seeing what it was like on the other, playing other teams. And it was kind of funny how I've never seen a running clock in college football, and we had it twice in that same year. And it amazes me, in 2002 when I was there, 2003, we had those things. Like, you don't see that in college football. And so experiencing those things is kind of unique to tell people about and tell players about. And And those coaches, like you said, those are the coaches that they're getting guys that, like I said, they're Division 1 for whatever reason they couldn't go back there, and so they had to come JUCO. It was for 1 year, a semester, to get grades, to get whatever it may be, and to see that hunger, then trying to match that with that intensity. Because so if I can match them, I know I can get to that level. Yep. And it could be injuries as well. And so I mean, going JUCO, you play. I played with a lot of guys that played the NFL, and got to see those and still have contact with them, and just kind of use that when talking with current players that we're coaching, and say, hey, we may bring them back and talk to them. Here's what it's like. It's opened up avenues of work experience after playing. The connections those guys have that they can talk to and have that connection with is big as well.
For sure. Yeah, I think all of this comes down to not only their mentality through all of this, but it's their work ethic. And you know, obviously the hunger is a big piece, right? You're not going to work hard if you're not hungry. But it all comes down to what their mentality can bounce back from, and physically if they're willing to put in the work to realize I need to work harder, right? And as a coach, whether you're high school, JUCO, it doesn't matter where, right? It's all about developing and coaching them through this time frame of their life to reach that pinnacle or whatever it is, right? It may not even be to go to the highest level. Maybe it's just I want to be a starter. I want some playing time, right? So you've kind of experienced, I mean, you have experienced multiple different levels at the college space, 4 to high school. So what's your, I guess, your perspective, right? The whole question of this is, where do you start with development? Like, how do you get kids to go from essentially, you know, you've coached high school, so how do you get a kid in the mentality of maybe JV to varsity? But, you know, obviously at the college space, you don't really have that piece. So how do you just get kids to go from point A to point B, which point B would be, I want to be a starter, when right now I'm kind of sitting bench or I'm not getting a lot of PT?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is when you have practice. If you have your varsity group, and then in that second wave of kids that thinks that they can be up there, there's sometimes we'll put them head to head. If it's 6v6, and say, and not to put that "see told you" moment, but get them to experience to see that. So we do a lot of statting. When I was at the high school, we statted everything. So that way we can go back and say, I need you at this level. If we're passing, I need you at a 2.3, 2.4. And so if they're not there, now we've set a standard for them to go by. And so they can shoot for that standard without saying you got to beat out so-and-so, or you're not as good as so-and-so. You can say, if you're not passing at this, the chances of you getting that experience is not going to be there. And so we have those benchmarks. And so going from the freshman ball all the way up to varsity in high school, if we're seeing that growth of that benchmark increasing as we go, that's big. Same thing with serving and serve receive hitting percentage. If we're saying we need you to hit an X amount percentage at this position, if they're not there, okay, but two other people are, we can say this is the reason why these two are playing. And so now we're comparing statistical stats that they can improve on day to day. So it's not like it's only in games, it's practice leading up to the game. So I always thought if I have a competition between 3 guys and all 3 can play, but 2 are a little bit better than the other, I can go, guys, leading up to from practice up to games, here's what you're hitting at. The 2 guys that are hitting this, you're starting, but the 3rd guy, be ready. I had a situation where I had 2 players that compete the same position, but if we had to go to a 4th or 5th set, she couldn't do it. And so I had another one say, okay, you're that 4th, 5th set player, because mentally the other one couldn't go past 3 sets. And so you may have that to kind of feed that into them. I had one that if they put that other color jersey on that the barrel jersey, their mind was just blown. But you put them in the regular jersey, they were spot on. So there's things like that. You go and say, hey, if you can get that mentality past that other color jersey, you're going to get more opportunities. But if you can't, here's what you're only getting.
I love that part where you said, you know, and you kind of find it in all sports, right? Like you find, no matter where you are, people who are great practice people or maybe great first half guys or whatever it is. And then the moment shows, whether, like you said, could be jersey, could be moment, whatever. Like you said, maybe she was a first 3-set girl, whatever the reason the best for, whether it's being able to close out, maybe it's stamina, whatever it may be, right? Like those things really do matter. And as a coach, I think it's kind of hard, especially I'm sure more on the college, well, maybe in general too, like to have that trust in that person in that moment. But as far as a college coach, like you have to look at, do I want somebody, like for example, if you're recruiting this girl, right, she's great in every aspect, but like you have to decide, do I want her for one? But let's say you do, or I should say you're contemplating, do I want this girl like because she's really great the first 3, or do I want the person like in another person, do I want this person because I know they can close out, right? And I think that can be not only difficult maybe as a college coach, because if you watch that, right, like you have to make that decision, but also as a high school coach, like, or even if this happened in college, when do I make that adjustment? And do I and let's specifically say, let's say this person's a freshman, sophomore, junior, do I go after somebody who can play all 5 sets, right? Like I think that can be kind of, I don't know, maybe getting wheels turning, I guess, in terms of like what do we really want as a program, and what do I want as a coach, as I try to solidify a roster, not only maybe in high school if this happened, but at the college level while you're recruiting. So I think that can be a little difficult too, I'm sure.
Yeah. And you're also looking at the team concept. Are they a good team player, teammate? Because
Sure.
you can have that great 5-star athlete, but they're very toxic. We call it the energy vampire that just sucks that energy out of the team.
Yep.
And so having that where you may say, I may have to go get 2 or 3 kids that talent-wise equal that one, but as far as teammates, team players, they're for the team. That's what you need. And so those are the biggest things. We're talking about high school. And the story that my mom told when she was very young coaching, she had a All-American high school athlete, but could not serve a lick. And she had a player that her only role was to come for that one girl in the back row to serve. And the parent of the All-Star was upset. Goes, why is my daughter not serving? And at that time, back in the 80s, kids were a little more upfront with their parents. And the kid goes, Mom, I'm not good at serving. This person here is doing her job on the team, coming in to serve because we need her to do that. And so for a kid to tell that to her parents is big. And so I think we've lost that over the years for whatever reason. But that was a teammate, 2 teammates that understood their roles, accepted their roles, and knew what was best for the team. And so when you get those players like that, that's great. And so when you're recruiting, yeah, you want that 5-star athlete that can play 6 rotations. But if they start becoming negative when stuff goes bad, and then that feeds and evolves in the team, you're kind of, you're in that that line of where do I go?
Yeah, for sure. And I think also, like, I'll be honest with you, like, I know I coach wrestling, so it's a little bit different, but I honestly respect the heck out of team sport, traditional team sport, coaches, because as you're talking right now about, doing you're doing your job is what I talk about that in wrestling too. Do your job and don't worry about it, right? You do yours. You're going to help team score team points, and that'll help the whole team in the long run. But like football, volleyball, you have to do your part, right? And so the selection of who's going to be the starter, I think sometimes it's to stand out. Like, yeah, this is definitely our libero. This is definitely our outside hitter or middle or whatever. I don't know all the positions. I know a few, but those are like the few I know. But you kind of, sometimes it's easy, and sometimes, like you said, you have those 2 or 3 guys or girls or whatever that are just as competitive, and it's really close, right? So making that selection while also, like you said, or I guess like back in the day, they can give that feedback to their parents, but in today's world, giving feedback and after a tough loss or after why this person's starting versus not starting or whatever it may be, I think is a really interesting piece of it too, just because, in today's world, the social media and parents' interaction more with the coaches, especially at the high school level. College may not be so much, but the idea that it's can be really tough to make that decision. So I give you guys props, because I know it's not an easy thing, at least I'm sure sometimes, to decide who's the best fit. And like you said, I'm sure sometimes it's just who gives us the most energy. And I would almost bet that sometimes situationally you're putting the person out there that fits, who brings the best out of all 5 of us. She may not be the best person technically, and she might not, and the other person may not even be toxic, like as a whole. But this person, when she's on the court or he's on the court, we just rally, right? And so I'm sure that sometimes you need that, even though that might be a quote unquote a little bit of a weaker player, but they bring more out to where as a team they collectively come together. So I'm sure that's an area that you face too sometimes.
Yeah, no, and when you talk about people playing beside each other, you may have 2 all-stars, 5-star athletes, all-Americans, but if they're beside each other, they can't communicate at all. And so then you're trying to say, okay, yes, what I need from you at this situation is your guys' connectedness together, even though you may not get a lot of stats or we may not set you a lot of balls for attacks, but your role has molded into something to help 2 other people. And doing that, and we've done it where person comes back to serve. Your job right now is just to serve, serving specialist. Not that you're not good. It's just right now this person has a float serve. We want a top spin. And we know you're hit and miss, but when you're on, you're on. And so putting them in that situation, if it's set point, match point, and you're 14-15 and you need that 1 point to either tie or to win it, and you put a player who's never played the whole game, but we know when they get in there and he's on, it's game. And we play those teams too. And so getting those guys to understand that, it takes a while, and that's where I like having that fall. Because again, men's side, we're in the spring. I've always been in the fall. So being able to develop, being able to train those cohesiveness and kind of having that team togetherness is a different avenue that I'm going down now. So.
You just referenced something that I didn't even think about. Men's volleyball is in the spring. Women's is in the fall, like you said. And so development wise, which we kind of skipped over, not really, but we didn't dive into like deep about what you're doing, which is fine. But does that help you? Do you think, like, is that a pro or a con for you to have a spring sport versus a fall sport?
I think it's a pro, just because, just like basketball, just like all those baseball, all those spring, fall, or winter, spring sports, is you have time in the fall, guys coming back, they're getting used to classes, they're getting used to people in general, the social side, but they're having that time where we have kids from Spain, France, Puerto Rico, Hawaii, where they haven't played together. And so they haven't built that connection. It'd be like a point guard and a center, just knowing where people are at. We don't have to say nothing. Right. We just know they're going to be there. And for setters, timing with hitting is tremendous, and you have to build that timing with your hitters in the pins and in the middle, and it takes time. And so if they're young, like we're going to be a young team again, if we're young and they're from different backgrounds, different verbiage, what they call different things, having that time to get everything synced up together is big. When we did it when I was coaching the women's in the fall, you get that springtime to build those players, and then you would take 2 months off, and then you have to redo that with the incoming freshmen and those. And whenever you take time off, even if it's a week, volleyball is a skill set that you get very ugly volleyball if you take a couple weeks off.
Sure. Well, since we're on the topic of that, real quick, what do you think is an overrated and or underrated technique in the sport of volleyball?
I had this happen. One of my games, I taught a player to do this. I think underhand serves, which you don't see underhand serves at all. And again, it's people will say it's completely overrated type of stuff. Like you don't need it in the sport. But we had a girl and this is years ago when I was assistant coach at JUCO. She would pepper the first ball. She would always pepper the back wall. Just her energy was going and just go. And I told her, go serve underhand first ball. And she almost got an ace because it was like a weird, like people were not, it was just a nice little easy underhand. And then the next ball she came back and she aced her jump serve. But it was that just getting that mental mindset is there. And so another thing with the guys, the float serve, I think is one it's an easy serve, but it's extremely hard at times to pass because you get a lot of side to side movement and it just drop. Top spin, you know what's happening. It's coming hard. It's going to drop. It may have a little side to it, but if you get your form there, they're easier balls to dig than a float, just because you know. And so I think those are 2 serves that I think can be underrated at times. And And so, yeah, those are some things that I think that learning at a young level are skills that you need to get. And then as you progress, then start to expand that. But I also think a lot of people are afraid to take those chances if they've never, say, top spin. Go do it. Like, learn how to do those things, because the more skill sets you have, the more you can do that. So you may top spin one time around through and float serve the next. But never stop learning the game. And that's where a lot of people they don't do that. And I think another thing that's underrated is video watching, film watching.
Oh
Like,
yeah, for sure.
in every sport you do it because you want to know how to beat the opponent, but I think a lot of times we forget to watch ourselves. What are we doing, and why, if we're not having success at this, say, this match, this set, what happened? Is it my footwork? Is it positioning? Did I go too early? Was I too late? I mean, just different things that if you can break yourself down on how an opponent would try to beat you, I think that's very underrated. Sometimes watching too much of the opponents can be overrated because you're trying too much on getting them and forgetting about yourself.
Yeah, that one right there, I think, is for me the biggest. Well, not the biggest thing, but based off what you mentioned, I think that's huge. I was watching something and I heard something one time, and just I also believe it, that if they're really good at something in wrestling terms, if they have, let's just say, two good moves, right? Or let's say in volleyball, probably in terms of like setting, if that's their best position, that's their best thing, it's going to be really hard for us to beat them in something they're really good at in a 1 week time frame, right? So we have to learn on how are we going to beat them to it, to where we're in our position before they're in theirs, right? Or how are we going to do it? And I know volleyball might be a little bit different because it's back and forth team, and obviously, sets and stuff like that are what it is. But the idea that, it's very easy to get caught up in watching other people and trying to, how do I stop them from getting to their position or stop them from getting to theirs, versus they're going to get to theirs no matter what. So we need to make sure we beat them to ours more, to where we can be in, better position or whatever the case is, right? So I can really appreciate that is something you focus on, because it is kind of a lost hope, or not lost hope, but it can be lost in the idea of, let's just focus on them and how do we stop it, or how do we beat them? Well, we need to make sure we don't beat ourselves first. I usually talk recruiting, but I think I'm going to skip that. The main question. I am curious to know, though, because you spent time at a few different locations in terms of like I said, 2 years high school, 4 year, things like that. I'm just curious to know. I talked earlier about challenges that you faced as just a general, but I'm curious to know, what have you faced that are some of the biggest challenges in your recruiting that you've learned over time, that you've had to overcome? And I know there's variables to this too, JUCO versus. And in high school, I know you're getting kids out, but now you're at a 4-year school, and I know there's probably some challenges you face there, whether it's price or just getting kids to come to Kansas, right? Whatever the case is. But anyways, what are some of the biggest challenges you faced in your coaching career in the recruiting space?
Yeah, I think a lot of it's the price, and that when you're going to a private, because we are a private institution, that, and a lot of people have a perception of private versus public schools, smaller schools versus the big universities. It's finding out you're going to pay no matter where you go. It's what features or things you want. You want a faith-based institution. Do you want class sizes 15-1 teacher-student ratio? Do you want a campus where no matter where you walk out, the president of the college knows your name, goes to your games? Professors are being able to communicate with you off campus. You're seeing them in the community. Does the community buy in? And so trying to get people to come to Kansas, say from California, Hawaii, Florida, that have 100,000, a million people in there, then come to Kansas of 55,000 people and go, yes, we don't have some of the things that you guys have. So like In-N-Out Burger, stuff like those things like that they're used to.
Yeah.
But we have other things that you can go walk through town and not worry about anything. How friendly people are. And we hear this now by the FIFA World Cup, all those people coming in, they're like, that come to Kansas City and they're like, man, we thought this was like Wizard of Oz, Dorothy, that's flat, all this stuff, all
Yeah.
those things that you get. And they're like, hey, we're going to come back to Kansas. We're going to come back to the Midwest because of the hospitality, because of the things that they offer, the slower pace. Talking about recruiting kids from the East Coast, West Coast, they look at rush hour traffic and they're like, okay, it's 5 o'clock. Rush hour traffic, I want to go for 10 miles. It's going to take me an hour. Well, here, no, it's not. It's going to take you 20 minutes. Like
Yeah.
those things. And so getting them to understand cost of living, that when you go into majors like our criminal justice, our biology programs, they're what you do in a smaller community compared to when you can be hands-on at bigger universities is night and day. Just talked to a kid from New York, and he goes, your biology program is top 75 in the nation, and that's all classifications. And for a small private institution having a top 75 biology program, criminal justice, you're able to potentially work with state troopers, the highway patrol earlier, and have those internships. And so those are things that we can talk about, that help those kids understand that I may be losing out on certain things, but what I'm gaining is more better. One of the kids that we have coming in from California, his parents were like, we want him out of California because everything happening. And his father is a law enforcement officer, and he's coming to do criminal justice in our school. And they're like, we want him out. And he was like, I want out of California. And so being able to tie that in and say, hey, there's a potential to get a job here once you graduate. And then to have those kids go do research projects in the Amazon for spring break. We had one of our Australian players do that for a week. That's something that some places you can't get at, but because we're a small school, you have a better selection of going on those trips.
Yeah, so it's just showing the value of what you get, even though the price might be more. Is sounds like the most important piece there. I can definitely understand that. I think, like you just said about when people were coming to the Midwest. Which, by the way, I will say this. I just told this. We actually had a girl down here, actually on a visit today. She's from Kansas, just south of Kansas City, and we talked about it. I guess two things. I'm gonna preface. One thing, I cannot stand Kansas City driving. I've lost out of my entire time, right? This is on the Missouri side, of course. I've spent more time doing a loop because my Google Maps on the sign says L, but there's two L's. So which L am I supposed to take? Like, it doesn't make sense. It irritates me. And this is a podcast for another day. So you referencing about now, don't get me wrong. I haven't really seen much traffic there, but you might add a minute or two because you might get lost a little bit. Now that's me. I don't know. That's just me. But I will say that you don't have to worry about like LA, and definitely nowhere near East Coast, West Coast, regardless if you're good at reading signs or not. But I will say, I love that you said about the Midwest stuff. We actually had a girl come down. A lot of girls, actually. We have, I think, 11 states represented this coming year to a small two-year school in eastern Oklahoma. We got 11 girls coming down from 11 different states coming here. And you referencing about like, they come here and they see it, they can feel it, right? And they get to see this, they get this experience of whatever it might be, financials or what they get from the community, blah, blah, blah. That's what it's all about, right? And I know it's a little bit different with you because you're forced to get out of state, and so you have to really kind of throw your net out there. But the idea that regardless of how much it costs, if you have what they like, and obviously as a coach too, you have to mesh well and blah, 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 these variables. But you're right. I do love that is something that not only the World Cup people, the international people have kind of spoken on, but something that you really focus on is that. And it sounds like that's a challenge that which I was going to say you've overcome. I know it's probably always going to be a challenge, but I think in general that you've kind of know how to navigate it now is obviously top tier. Like, it's great that you know how to kind of navigate it and know how to sell the school in terms of what these people want. So it sounds like, I bet, so that conversation with them, not, I guess, kind of wants and needs in terms of sales, but the idea of getting to know what they're actually wanting in their experience is ultimately the most important thing for you to then overcome these challenges. Because if you were just blank with that conversation and you didn't actually care to dive into it, I bet it'd be really hard to recruit a lot of people.
Yeah, it is. And then that's where early in those emails and phone calls, it's asking those kids, if we can get him on campus, we say there's a high chance that we're going to get him here. just because of who they're talking to, and how that network is out there. But again, it's that getting that perception, that mindset of what Kansas is like or Midwest is like.
Yeah.
But again, we all say once you get a couple people from that area here and they can go and say, no, this is what it's like, or people are nice, or people are friendly. The experiences they had on campus, like we had a flag football player from New Jersey, and she was able to talk to a player that we got from New Jersey. Was like, hey, here's what it's like. She goes, I loved it here.
That's
I've been here
cool.
all 4 years. Yes, the price is the price, but what I got from it outweighed the cost. And we always tell them too, we don't want to put a kid in debt, but the way education is going at the higher levels, the cost is always going to rise. I mean, all those factors that we have no control over, and we just had to say, here's what we're going to try to help you with. But at the end of the day, what you want to get from it is the biggest thing. If if the scholarship amount or what you're paying is the ultimate uh, goal is to get the cheapest place, that's great. But don't go to a place just because of cost, and then you have to change your major or what you want to do. Um, and that's what we tell them. It's like, this is what you want to do. You want to give back to the community. Here's what you can do here, with that. So yeah, that's the ultimate way is we use kids, current roster kids in the community to help recruit as well. Say, here's what it's like. And that's, I mean, the older you get, the more you need those kids at the university to help you recruit, because they're experiencing those things that next kid will as well.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest things you also said in there, at least in my opinion, taking it from it, which obviously all that's important, but the idea that you talk about changing majors. Also, if you just don't like it, you're going to want to transfer, which is not ideal anyways, right? So making sure it's everything that fits the mold is, I think, important. Not just chasing money, because chasing money is great, but it's also not going to get you happiness necessarily if you don't like the place or whatever the variables are. So I can definitely appreciate that piece there. Now, I guess onto the final few questions I got for the philosophy side. Kind of my fun, some of my favorite pieces is to hear your thoughts on some things. So my first question is, how do you build a successful culture on the level of buy-in and mindset?
I think you have to get the top players. Like if you have a group of guys that it's your top players, your A1 players, you've got to get the starters in buying in.
Sure.
If you don't get them buying in, and the upperclassmen, it's going to hurt everybody else.
Sure.
But you also need to have an open dialogue with them. And I tell all of them, I'll listen to you guys all the time. At the end of the day, though, I have to make that decision because I'm the head coach, and ultimately it has to fall on me if we have success, if we don't. But they're being heard. They may have some say in some drills. Like I say, if you got drills from back home, bring them. If they're saying, Coach, hey, here's what we're seeing on the court, and then you're taking that into consideration. So having little moments like that, is key. And ultimately, you have to see the big picture. And the guys I have currently, I told them, I said, guys, I've been doing this, building programs, and I said, I've been here 5 different times like this. And so getting them at 18, 19 years old to, if they came from a successful program, now we're not successful at college, is not going to be instant. And you can build an instant team going through NIL, going through the portal, but you're only going to do that for a couple years. And I always tell, and I've been told this before too, it takes at the 4-year level, it takes 4 years to build a program right. It takes one bad recruiting class to crush it. And JUCO, you can rebuild every year and you can rebuild it faster. But if you have one bad recruiting spell, it can just hurt you. And getting that time. So if you come into a program and you're a brand new coach, it's going to take you a couple years to get all that negativity out because it's from previous coaches. It's from previous players. And so it takes time for that. Now, if those players leave, then it's slowly building that. But it takes time, and you do it with team meetings. You do it with setting the expectations, having here's what we expect, here's what we have to do, and if we don't follow through it, these are our consequences. And then holding those players to the consequences. If that's your star player, they got to be in there. And they may be the one that you hit the hardest, And you have to tell them, I'm going to be on you the hardest because everybody needs to see I'm not going to play favorites.
Yeah. I've said this before to some people too. Like I remember some girls actually asked me last year. They were like, because I'm not gonna lie, there was one or two girls that I gave a little bit longer leash than some others. Not because I didn't want them to go away or whatever, but it was because I knew some of the stuff that I was told, back home, right? I knew they had a lot more personal stuff. I knew they struggled in some areas, so I gave them a little bit more longer leash for them to come up to our standards, right? And some of the girls who were already at the standards were mad because they were like, well, why don't you, like, you're way harder on me, or you don't give us that same leash. And it's like, well, it's because you guys are at our standards. I'm not going to let you come down. You're already here. You're already going, or whatever the case is. This girl, I'm trying to get her here. And so that's the reason behind it, right? It's like, I'm not going to lose standards because you're already there. I'm not going to let you come back down. I'm just trying to get her up. And sometimes that plays a factor into should I give too much leash or not, which I've learned over time that you don't necessarily. I mean, it's case by case basis really, but like in general, right, you keep these standards, you maintain them, and that's the only way for us to build that, like you said, is well, one of the ways I should say is matching that. So I definitely agree with your timing and some of that stuff. So I appreciate that. My final question for you, at least in terms of philosophy, it's the name of the show. Why do you do this? What's your coach's why?
I think because of what I was given when I was a player. My biggest thing is I use athletics as an outlet with stuff that happened in my personal life. And what I saw when I started coaching, what I saw how players responded to certain coaches, how they responded to life after a coach, positive, negatively, and then how my parents impacted their athletes. I think that was the biggest thing. We also do this with faith as well, because things happen. Players have situations at home that cause different stuff, and if they're thousands of miles away, they have nobody but you to lean on. And so being a voice, a calming voice, helping them out when they need it, I think that's the biggest thing. And I always tell my athletes that my shoulders are broad for a reason. God made them that way. And so when they come to talk to me, we're going to talk one-on-one. We're going to have deep conversations. Some conversations are not going to be like favorite type of ones, but they have to happen. And so just building those conversations with them and then seeing their results after. Again, players that have gone on to become coaches, that you talked about, that coaching tree, seeing that happen and the success of those former players now giving back. I think ultimately that's the reason why. And I think also too is I don't know if I could be behind the desk. I taught for 3 years when I was in high school, and I'm like, I just need to be on the court all the time. So I think that's another reason why I do it. And I think the reason why I invested a lot into there. But yeah, we all know coaching. We're not doing it for the fame, for the money. It's a small 1% that get that stuff, and so it's the successes of players years down the road that are our trophies. So,
Yep.
For sure. Amen, by the way, to your broad shoulders and that you have that for your people, and I guess just in general. I really appreciate that piece there, and relationships and what you're doing it for. Like you said, we're not doing it for money. We're doing it for the love of the game and for the love of giving back. So I can appreciate that. I have 2 or 3 fun questions to end it with, just some debate, maybe questions for you. But before we get to that, if you guys are still watching this on YouTube, make sure you guys hit that bell, like, subscribe, all the 9 yards. If you're an audio listener, make sure you hit those stars, leave a review, but say what you got to say, but say it with your chest, because Coach and I want to hear it. Coach, fun few questions for you. Number 1, what division? Now, this can, by the way, let me preface this. I know you're not, I guess you're technically new to the men's game, but you can answer this in general for either men's, or you can do it as a whole for volleyball. I'm going to let you choose based off these questions. Okay, anyways, back to the question. Number 1, what division is the most entertaining to watch? So I know you got like beach volleyball. I know you got men. I know you got NCAA, JUCO, NAI, blah, blah, blah. You got all of it. What's the most entertaining to watch?
Um, when you're talking about the technical side of it, I love the Division One, the high Division One and professional level. When you're talking about the stuff that you're like that just happened moments, I think the NAI level for the men's, because we're getting guys that are undersized. We're
Sure.
getting guys that may have been thrown to the curb saying, hey, you can't be at this level because of X, Y, Z. And so they have a chip on their shoulder. And so I think that kind of there on the women's side, JUCO. I mean, I love the JUCO side, even though Division One's great and there's a lot of great athletes there. The JUCO realm with the international, I took my grad assistant 1 year to go back to the national tournament, JUCO national tournament, and she was like, "This is like it is. Like you got players from different countries, or even the same country, and they're from different clubs, and they're battling each other." I go, "This is night and day." Like we had Brazilians, and we played a rival team in our conference that had Brazilians, and it was, I mean, we had cards being thrown, yellow cards, red cards, like it was trash talking and all
Yeah.
that. And that's the same with the guys at the NAI level that I'm at. Our rival school that we played, I bet you we had 4 yellow cards, and if it wasn't because the R1 knew me personally, our player would probably been kicked out because of that.
Mm.
And that's the side between the guys and the girls is the guys. There's a lot of trash talking on
Sure.
guys volleyball. It can be good, it can be fun, it can be positive, but then it can get crossing that line.
Of course.
So like I said, it just depends on men's or women's. It depends on what you want to see in that game. But like I said, I love to watch professional volleyball at the Olympic level. And like I said, with the Division One with Hawaii, the way they played this year, I mean, that was just amazing how they did what they did at the men's game.
Absolutely, for sure. I appreciate that. Okay. What state produces the best high school volleyball?
This is
Yeah, it's
what's
the
going to
hottest
get
question.
me. This is what's going to probably get me canceled on this. Um, I
Definitely
think
the
it
hottest
depends.
question for sure.
Yeah, I think it depends on what you're looking at position wise.
Okay.
I think West Coast has a lot of players that can be very diverse. Hawaii is always going to be a hotbed. I mean, for men's volleyball, the guys, I mean, 5'4", 6'6", like they can play a multitude of positions. And I think that's because they learn at a young level. They're on the beach playing, they're on grass playing, they're on the surface playing, and so they grow up doing that. So there's a little different there, and then that goes to that international side of it, where I sometimes people think Hawaii's international because of the way they play, if that makes sense. Um, and so the style of play is different, and so that's where you see that come in. Florida, I know, has a lot of other good talents there, but to me, West Coast is probably going to be the best when you're talking about California, Hawaii, all that with men's volleyball, just because that game has been there longer. Um, a lot more men's kind of filter that way as they get older with the professional beach down there. And so it just, you see a lot more there.
All right. All right. So West Coast, Cali, Hawaii. That's the two options. That's the two answers there. You know what? I'm sorry if I did it to you. I mean, those boys out in New York, New Jersey, and Florida, you know, he still loves you. He still wants y'all to come out there. But, you know, facts are facts. It is what it is. You know, I can understand a lot of it. Like you said, it just comes from the history. It's been out there longer. So it's just developed. It is what it is. I love it for sure. Yeah, well, so Coach, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk today. I learned a lot about men's volleyball. You're actually, which I usually preface this way earlier, but you're the first men's volleyball coach I've ever had on here. So that's cool as well. So I really appreciate you taking the time to talk not only about volleyball, but your coaching journey. So I appreciate that again. Thanks for jumping on.
Thank you very much for that. It's good to be able to kind of get my wings out there with the men's side. And I know a lot more coaches have had more years experience doing it. So their answers and all that be a lot different, but good getting on here and talking with you.
For sure, man. Yeah, I love the perspective of every coach. You know, a lot of times you learn something from a first-year coach just as much as you can learn from a 30-year coach, right? So I appreciate it. I definitely took a lot. There's some things that, if you didn't see me over here, I was writing some stuff down in the corner. So I took some stuff, and hopefully you guys listening took some stuff too. I'm going to put Coach Stephenson and KWU in the description. Put some of their stuff to follow, so you guys go and give them a follow and follow along with their season, kind of see what they have going on and stay up to date with Coach. And I'm sure if any of you volleyball coaches or any coach in general have any questions, I'm sure he'd be willing to answer anything if you guys did reach out to him if you have anything. So feel free to do that. But with that being said, Coach, thanks again. Thank you guys so much for watching and listening, and we'll see you guys on the next episode. Peace.